In this video, we'll take a broad look at the reshaping tools that allow you to transform objects in various ways. Let's take a closer look. I'm beginning this video with the reshapingtools.ai file already open on my computer. And I like to think of many of these tools more of transformation tools than reshaping tools, but in Illustrator they fall under the category of reshaping tools. So you'll find these in the Tools panel, and they consist of the Rotate tool, Reflect tool, and then the Scale, Shear, and Reshape tools. So we're just going to take a broad look at how these work. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this group of artwork elements, and I'm going to grab my Rotate tool. Now, any of these tools reference a transformation point, and by default, that transformation point is in the dead center of the object. Now, what happens when we use this tool is you have to think of this transformation point as the pivot point, because using this rotate tool, I'm going to rotate based on that pivot point. Now, you want to think of that as like a lever. So what I find is the further out of the artwork, the further away from the artwork you come, the more control you'll gain. So for example, it's going to transform on this point, and I'm going to click up here and drag. And as I do, you can see that I'm rotating this artwork in a precise value. You can see my smart guides show up telling me exactly what angle I'm rotating this to. And you can really position it wherever you want it to go. So, if I point it in this direction and I let go, it's going to rotate it at that angle. Now, in addition, I can click on this and I can choose the Reflect tool. Now, the Reflect tool works in a very similar fashion, but if I click and drag, you're going to get a very similar result, but you'll notice that it reflected or flipped on the axis in which I clicked. I'm going to undo that, and you'll notice wherever I click and drag, it's going to flip it. Okay, so if I click down here, it's going to flip it on the axis in which I'm dragging. Now, to get a little bit more control, what I find is like if I want to flip this so it's pointing in this direction here, what I can do is if you click to determine the transformation point and then click below it to draw kind of an axis, it's going to flip on that axis. So if I undo that and I click here and here, it's going to flip on that axis. So that's how the Reflect tool is going to work. Now, the Scale tool works very similar to the Rotate tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click off of this, and then I'll select it and grab the Scale tool. That way it resets my transformation point to the center. This works the same way. If I click and drag up, it's going to scale this up. And if you want to scale it proportionately, hold down the Shift key as you're dragging. So as I drag outward, it's going to scale the object up or make it larger. And if I click and drag towards the transformation point, it's going to make the object smaller. So you have a lot of flexibility as far as how this is going to transform your object. And then if I click and hold on that, we have the Shear tool. And this works in a similar fashion. This is my transformation point. So if I click and drag, I'm going to start distorting this or skewing it. And I can distort this in a number of different ways. You can even hold down the Shift key as you drag to constrain the movement as well. Now, what makes it a little bit easier is if you set your transformation point like at the edge of your artwork, and then you Shift, click, and drag, you can distort it again in a number of different ways. So that's how this Shear tool is going to work. Now, last but not least, we have the Reshape tool. And to show you this one, I'm just going to slide this artwork over here, and I'm going to grab this curved line that we have. And the job of the Reshape tool is to reshape an object, but keep its overall appearance. And so, for example, if I select this object and I click on, an anchor point, you can see that anchor point gets bigger. And if you drag, you can see that it's distorting it evenly. It's reshaping it, but kind of keeping the overall shape along with it. You'll notice if I were to use like the direct selection tool, I'm going to get a very different result because it's only distorting that portion of the path. But the reshape tool, in contrast, Go ahead and select this, grab the reshape tool again, and if I click on this, you can see that I can click and drag and distort this in a number of different ways. One way that I like to use this tool is if you draw, say, like a straight line segment. You can grab that reshape tool, and I like this because you can click on an area to add an anchor point and then drag to distort it in an interesting and unique way. So you can even hold down the Alt or Option key to kind of make copies as you drag. So you can create some really cool patterns or artwork using that reshape tool. Now, last but not least, we also have the free transform tool. And you'll notice something new if you've used previous versions of Illustrator. We get this dialog or this little indicator here that was designed to be used for touch devices. And it also helps when you're working on a regular computer, though, as well. So when I'm going to transform an object, such as what I just created, I can lock the proportions. So I can drag this and I can scale this object proportionately. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have all these items selected. Let's reselect that. I'm going to go to free transform. So when I grab this, I can distort it evenly. But if I turn on constrained proportions, I can scale this entire object proportionately. And then you also, of course, have the perspective distort, where you can distort this in perspective in the horizontal and vertical orientation. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. We'll kind of slide this out of the way here. And as you can see, these combination of tools bring a lot of power and control to adjusting artwork in Illustrator. So definitely keep these tools in mind when transforming your own artwork.